So, as we heard last night, there was quite a kerfuffle with YouTube. In fact, as I was watching some of the screenings or research last night, I noticed that I got locked out completely. Now, on the devices that I normally monitor are, well, very large monitors on the walls. And I don't use a login for those. I want it to be more organic, what's fed to me. And we all know none of it is organic. But yesterday in particular, as we went down the process of getting closer and closer to YouTube locking people out, I noticed that I was only getting Asmongold TV. And you know what? I forgot to put that in the overview here. So I'm trying to see if I have a pen to write that down. Hopefully, I'll go back to that. If not, I'll have to speak about it tomorrow. But YouTube, if you're not already logged in with an account, it used to give you a whole bunch of rows based on different genre or criteria or whatever it is, categories that you could choose from. But in order to try to force you to sign in, what they've come down to is one line across with, I don't know, let's say a dozen different choices. And then you can refresh those choices, but it usually is the same choices. And within those choices, they're usually 10 out of 12 or whatever that amount is of the same exact creator. And so they don't allow much variety. Now you can go search and have your own list, but you can only have 5 spots there and it bumps it off so you can't see. So they made it more and more limited. What was very interesting is on my phone, all of a sudden over the weekend, I started getting updates from a whole bunch of different channels, many I've never seen before. But apparently, even though I do not subscribe to channels, I had somehow voluntarily subscribed to a whole bunch of channels, and everybody was now giving me notifications. So I not only had to ask YouTube not to send me notifications, I've never turned that on. That's always been my preference. But in addition to that, I had to go back in and unsubscribe from shows that they're not on my list. They might be fine shows. However, as we were going down this process, Asmongold TV, as I mentioned, became the headliner across everything. So I spent some time watching that, and that was very interesting. But first, what I want to talk about today is Save California. Taxes, power, Prop 13, and the fight for the middle class. I'd like to keep this around 60 minutes. I think it may go a little bit longer. I really want to focus again on the ridiculousness of California thinking that anything in your pocket belongs to them. And the biggest global highlight of this that we have right now is the California jock tax. That was absurd. It's embarrassing. And quite honestly, if I was a professional athlete, I would never even drive through the state of California. Prop 13, we're working on a repeal of the different propositions that are trying to unravel it so we can solidify Prop 13. Prop 19, in one moment, undid generational wealth with just that one sweep of the pen. And people were lied to about what it was. Even California, a franchise tax board had no idea that it would pass. And so they weren't even prepared until after the timelines to offer any kind of guidance. So everybody missed out. San Francisco reparations. If you were a slave in California, San Francisco is still pushing forward to give you reparations. You're correct. California was never a slave state. And we haven't had slavery in this country for over 200 years. Well, at least legally, we know underground what's happening. But why are the people of California moving forward? And who are they determining will pay to who? Silicon Valley snow. We have snow in the mountains all the way around us here in the valley. It is very, very cold. And when I say cold, I think it might have gotten as low as 56 degrees today. But there is snow all the way around us. Private equity HOAs, they're coming for you, and they've come for me. Wall Street retirement crash is pending. Also, an update on Social Security. TPUSA controversy. Why is this still in the news, and why does it matter? And California taxes for 2026. Okay, So California, the Golden State, innovation capital of the world is what we're told. The fifth largest economy on the entire planet is based right here in just Silicon Valley. And yet people are leaving. Billionaires are leaving. Businesses are leaving. It's not sustainable anymore. Homes are becoming unaffordable. Insurance is collapsing. Retirement savings feel fragile. And lawmakers keep asking more, more, more. Just give us more money while they travel the world on our dime. Right now, I heard that there's one and only one building site that is currently rebuilding after the disaster down in Southern California, Pacific Palisades last January. And it's in Palisades, that might be different, but along the shores where the ocean is, and oh, the irony of that, so many burnt down, and there's only one that's allowed to rebuild right now. So tonight we're talking about everything that I guess we're not supposed to talk about. And we're going to bundle it all together in one conversation. Again, the California jock tax, snow in Silicon Valley, reparations in San Francisco, fire sprinklers mandate that are threatening to take homes in San Francisco, private equity taking over your HOA, youth conservative politics shaking high schools, and why Prop 13 might be the last firewall standing between homeowners and complete state collapse. This is not left versus right anymore. This is math versus reality. And no, math, although the educators in California would like you to believe that math is something that just feels good, those of us who understand how math works, we like to live in the realm of reality. This is Tech Reality with Barbara. And tonight we're asking, can California survive on its own policies? So I want to start here before I get too far along with Asmongold TV. And I want to give him a shout out. You know, over the years, I think all of us have come across him. And I believe it's spelled Asmongold TV on YouTube. And I absolutely want to give him a thumbs up. It looks like he really has had a heartfelt life, and he's pretty open about it. He had to leave the work world and leave an opportunity for university in order to take care of his mom. And he's gone through the story with her, and then what happened with his father. And it looks like he's been in almost a shock, absolute survival mode, as friends have come in and helped him with his house and get him organized and get him moving forward. I think it's really an interesting story to hear Asmongold himself talk about his life and open up a little bit. You can see he is just one big ball of love and wants to care for the whole world. And I don't know that he's 100% had that support himself. Although he might have said he has, and he loved both of his parents. It's really was an interesting pathway. And to that, I thank YouTube for the opportunity to learn more about Asmongold. And I might take another peek around the corner too to keep up with the guy. But anyways, kudos to you. So I wanted to start here with, you know what it looks like. Again, I put on this list of what I wanted to talk about today, the FBI. And wouldn't you know it, ChatGPT once again deleted it. So I wanted to give you an update on Beverly. And I'll go ahead and put the older video in here. By older, I mean a few weeks ago when we were searching for help and we were still needing an attorney. So as you and I go through life, it often feels like we're just kind of ducking and weaving and just trying to figure out how we can get from one stepping stone to the next. We're constantly under attack, whether it's survival in the workplace, keeping our homes, taking care of our families, organizations infiltrating public locations where our children might be. Every single area is more than just a whack-a-mole at this point. It has gotten absolutely absurd and quite honestly exhausting, but everybody has the same reaction. Why don't you just hire an attorney? Do they not understand that attorneys are people? Attorneys aren't AI yet. You can't go into a court with AI. You go in with an attorney. Now, anybody can represent themselves, but you can't make a mockery of the court. And if you don't know how to properly represent yourselves, then you can get hit with massive fines and fees for wasting the court time and whoever is the defendant. Who are you going after? And so this isn't something we take lightly, but if you can't get an attorney, does that mean you don't actually have rights? Pretty much. That's what I'm being told right here, which is why my escape from Silicon Valley has been so important as I go to different counties and different jurisdictions and learn how corrupt Santa Clara County actually is and how nobody will do their own job. So you're more vulnerable. Today, I spent down at the Santa Clara County Clerk's office who refused to do anything. Although I do have a happy story as we go through this. But Beverly and I went down to the clerk's office because we had a document that we wanted to file. And let me see if I've got the title of it right here. It's called a Notice of Disputed Foreclosure document. And what we wanted to do is attach something to the home through the clerk's office so that if, in fact, the people who stole her home, allegedly, try to sell her home, that there's at least a note there so that the new buyer is notified that, in fact, somebody still thinks they have claim to the home and they're hoping to get back into court to prove that claim. You cannot put anything in the record that says, hey, this is mine, or this is illegal, or you can't. You have to be very, very careful. In fact, we had to do immense amount of research, not make it a legal document. We're not lawyers. She's just trying to say, hey, this is it. We talked to many title companies and we went to a clerk's office outside the county before we went down there. We then had the document notarized and we asked the clerk's office there if we could file something and what we would file. And they told us yes. What was that, a month and a half ago? So we already knew we could do it. We double checked what the information was and we went through the process. So we get down there today to pay our fee and file it, and you know it, they won't accept it. Even though they told us that they don't review any of the documents and anything anybody files, they just stamp and attach to the home. For some reason, they accepted the affidavit of death saying she died and the document that transferred title from her name to somebody else's name. And our county is the only one in the area that will not allow a title lockdown because the county benefits immensely from getting out from under Prop 13, reevaluating the assessed value of the home. It went from, I don't know, around $600 to about $42,000 a year that the county's now bringing in because of their reassessment of accepting the alleged fraud document. So all of a sudden we go in and we want to put a flag on the property as a placeholder and they won't accept that. So that's okay. Then please tell us online or via manual where we would research what the proper format needs to be or what the proper jurisdiction would be or what the proper whatever you want to call it would be so that we can reformat this and submit it. They can't do any of that. They can't offer the law, but they can tell you that they're not going to accept anything and it's not their job. So we were there for probably about 90 minutes with everybody saying it's not their job. Finally, we walked to the next building, which was not the assessor, which was not the clerk's office, but the assessor's office. That person informed me that we were in the wrong building. The answers were in the building we came from. And when I told him that where we came from are idiots and they refused to help us, he said, yeah, I know. So he said, can you wait just a few minutes? He got up and got a supervisor who came out and unraveled everything for us. And we are so grateful to those two men who listened to us and actually went above and beyond. So what the supervisor did is he went ahead and asked us, first of all, he pulled up a document on a shared screen so that Beverly and I and he could look at it. And he said, Beverly, is this your signature? And she looked at the document and she said, "No, that's not my signature." He said, "I didn't think so." So then he said, "I'll be right back." And he took maybe 10 or 15 minutes. It wasn't a long time, but we were shocked when he came back. He said that he knew that wasn't her signature and he had some other documents to run it against. He also knew that this notice of default that was initially filed against her was unraveled and it had to be rescinded on the part of the loan company. The loan company stopped the NOD but never officially rescinded the documents, even though Beverly had hired an attorney to do that more than 15 years ago. And he could see the process. So what he said is, because the home has been taken, we need to move forward with the title company who accepted the fraudulent loan originally in 2006. So we saw the name of the title company, and lo and behold, the same year that her home was allegedly stolen from her is the same year that that title company went out of business. And the company who was involved in processing the money sold within a few months after that. All of this was right. They just cleaned off their books and shoved the rest of the cases off the cliff. So we went back and he helped guide us to a different title company that probably bought them out. We were able then to file finally a claim with the title company. It's an owner claim submittal form, and we attached the documents that we had from the county showing the fraudulent document, the right to the claim, and a signed affidavit from Beverly. So at this point, what we're hoping for is the title insurance will come back and help us put a mark on the title, or actually with the county clerk, will provide a resource for her, at least move forward and overturn that document, because the notary can't be validated, the original deed cannot be found, and the two companies involved in transferring the information were required to provide proof that they had authorization to sell this property, and they've not only did not, they refused to, and they illegally foreclosed. There's processes in California that are stricter than many other states, and none of those processes were followed. And so that's the update right now on Beverly and the title. However, before we left the title company, we got a call from the FBI. So this is the third level meeting with the FBI. We really didn't think they'd ever call. We're very grateful for the agent who spoke to us today for a couple hours, and we're very hopeful that we will be able to get them the sufficient information in order to move forward, as this is a very detailed criminal event that happened across multiple states with multiple banking institutions and against an elderly person. Anybody over 65 in California is additionally protected, and I believe 65 is also the barrier for federal, but I do know California. So it is under FBI jurisdiction, and we now have an agent on the case. But as I attach the additional link, if you have any insights to help Beverly, we are absolutely open to this. So I want to jump back in here, since again, ChatGPT apparently would not allow talk about the FBI, as I pointed out in yesterday's rant, that ChatGPT is cutting out a lot of information. So I want to be clear from the beginning. This episode is not about outrage, but it probably should be. It's really meant to be about alignment. We all know that something is off. And as I've stated before, where goes California, goes the rest of the United States. And unfortunately, the rest of the world. It seems like California is some kind of, let's just call it a petri dish for lack of experimental terms. But it's absolutely sad that California has been sold out from under us. Somebody did a talk yesterday, and he said California used to smell like sunblock, and you would hear Beach Boys playing. You don't get either anymore. Nobody's out there sunbathing, and granted, it's winter, but the scents aren't the same. The feelings aren't the same. It's sad that we've lost just the whole culture of what California was. But again, this is more about alignment tonight, because when policies stack up one by another, they create pressure. And when pressure builds long enough, something has to break. I live here, and you might live here too. We're not political pawns, but we are taxpayers. And I don't think we've even become called citizens in so long, because we were so far brushed aside. Did you know that starting on March 1st of this year, a citizen will finally have priority when applying for a small business administration loan? I don't know when it changed, but slowly, under 8A and other cutouts, everybody but individuals that looked like myself got priority, specifically individuals from other countries who came to this country as immigrants. They got priority. All the money from taxpayers was given to them to start businesses. Yet all these years, if I've tried to fuel my business to move forward, I haven't been able to get loans. They have a small amount every year. It's actually quite a large kitty, but there was never enough for me, I was told. So not citizens, those got brushed aside, but taxpayers. Well, I'm a parent, a business owner, I'm a worker, and at someday I'd like to be a retiree. According to the plan I had, which apparently there was laughter there, I was to have retired last year. I had set up my whole career around that. And that didn't happen. Now I don't even have a vision for retirement. But we do deserve transparency. So this evening we are connecting the dots that are usually discussed separately, but I'm connecting them together. Why California taxes visiting athletes through the jock tax, why mega events strain residents, why Silicon Valley just saw snow, why San Francisco debates reparations despite California never being a slave state, why indoor fire sprinklers mandates are exploding costs, why private equity firms are quietly running your HOA, and why conservative politics are triggering child protective services calls, why Wall Street legally can expose and erase your entire retirement, and why Prop 13 matters now more than ever. We just saw Mamdani in New York City last night give a huge speech. And what's he going to do? He's doubling down on his promise. He is a sanctuary city. Everybody there that asks, as long as they're an immigrant, gets free housing, free food, free education, free. But his budget is too far off. He can't afford it. He said that he would not raise taxes on the middle class. And who's he raising taxes on? The middle class. Everybody that's just holding on to property in New York right now, in New York City, is going to see a huge property tax increase. And that could break the state. The amount of money that they bring in when they can't raise taxes to raise rents in order to cover it just doesn't make sense anymore. That part of the state will become unrecognizable. So this is a system episode. It's all about the system. Because when you back up, the real question becomes not so much are we living within our means, but are the people that make the policies that are spending your money living within the means that we have? Or are we building a state structure that requires permanent escalation? More people, more money, more people, more money, an eternal pyramid scheme. And it doesn't have to be that way. And if we back up even further and we look at this planet, how is it that almost every single one of the countries on this planet is in debt? How is that? Who is all the money owed to? You would think that there'd be a few countries that have extreme wealth. But when you look at the map, it shows everybody's in debt. It makes no sense. But it sure scratches your head and makes you remember John Perkins in his book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Where's all this money come from? And where has it all gone? And that was the perfect of the Doge audit and the Doge edit or review, however they want to look at it, at TPUSA. So the California jock tax. California taxes income earned inside of the state. California considers itself a global income state. If you touch base in California, you owe a percentage of your money from everywhere in the world, including athletes and entertainers. That includes visiting NFL teams, NBA players, musicians, anyone paid while working here. This policy is commonly known as the jock tax. States like New York and California apply it because income generated within their borders is taxable. But here's my thought. On paper, some people say it's legally defensible. If you earn money here, you pay it here. You don't live here, you don't get to enjoy the results of that tax. What happened to taxation without representation? But the larger question is economic balance. California already has some of the highest marginal income tax rates in the entire country, in every category. When mega events come to town, the state collects revenues from income taxes, sales taxes, hotel occupancy tax, event permits, vendor licensing, all the union agreements. Every direction they can, they're taking more money on more money on more money. That $1 whittles on down to a few pennies after all of its taxes. So the short-term revenue spike looks very impressive. But the infrastructure strain, the police, security, road congestion, emergency services, falls heavily on local systems funded by residents year-round, which is also why I don't support that either. However, I have noticed driving around my town, and I mentioned this, I think it was yesterday, everywhere I go, whether it's every parking lot or inside every store or every empty vacant building, up and down my street, there are constant private security. This is something that I only saw previously in Colombia, where every street corner had a little hut for a man with a rifle to stand in, automatic rifle. That's not the world I want to live in. So we dumped everybody into this country, and now we can no longer ensure our safety. So we all have to pay private security in order to protect ourselves. That's why that pack of gum now costs $8. Everything's added into it. This creates tension because residents feel like they're underwriting a spectacle. I couldn't go to the event. I couldn't get near it because of the crowds and the chaos and all of it felt very dangerous. All of the security keeping people back. And I didn't have a spare $6,400 laying around to buy a ticket for one person, more or less who goes by themselves, for my son and I, or a family of 4. And by the time it got down to $4,000, I don't know who actually got those. We didn't seriously step out to find those. So we couldn't even enjoy the event. All we could do was stay clear. So should California even host major events? Well, ChatGPT says absolutely yes. I say, no, we're done. Until we can behave, no. But should residents feel like permanent underwriters? ChatGPT says that's a fair question, and fairness matters more than headlines. Quite honestly, I'm done. I voted multiple times to not have the various stadiums built, and it didn't matter. They found a way to do it without being voted in. And then they keep asking for more and more money on property taxes year after year after year in order to support what we voted down. So I want to talk about snow in Silicon Valley. During the years prior to Trump's first election, we basically had no rain in California. We'd become a desert. I remember after Trump was elected was the first time that I woke my son up in the middle of the night to get him to run outside and jump in the puddles. He'd never felt that before. Sorry, I'm going to sneeze here. And I didn't want him to miss that. And yet we finally have rain again. And we now have snow. Let's see if I can. Excuse me. Sorry, I couldn't get it mute fast enough. So Silicon Valley is a valley, and the peaks around us, especially over on the Mount Hamilton side, are all covered with white snow caps right now. It's not fairy tale like, but it certainly doesn't happen every year. Unusual weather events are just moments that we're getting here and there. They impact our infrastructure, power grids, road preparedness, and insurance modeling. California's systems were built for certain environmental assumptions. As patterns shift, costs are said to have increased. Well, it's at least another reason for them to dig money out of our pockets. Insurance premiums rise, utility maintenance expands, and again, the question becomes who pays? Because in California, the answer increasingly feels like me, the resident here. I want to talk a little bit as well about the San Francisco reparations debate. And I want to be careful on this. San Francisco has debated reparations proposals for descendants of enslaved people. Tell me how that makes sense. Where would that even come from? Who would pay it as an example? And who would receive it as an example? This just feels like another way to empty out money from one group of people, pass it through another NGO to scrape off 90% and shell out 8 to 10% to whoever can catch it on the other side. Important historical clarity. California entered the Union as a free state in 1850. We're now in 2026. The United States abolished slavery in 1865. We're now in 2026. However, systematic discrimination extended long before the formal abolition. The debate in San Francisco centers around historical inequities, not really slavery. People are just saying that life is not fair. Well, I don't think any of us were promised a fair life, including housing discrimination, redlining, and exclusionary policies. I've been talking over these last few weeks how more and more my hair color is attracting outrageous attention. The discrimination and hatred towards me continues to grow. The media, social media, the teachers, classrooms, education, everything's been rewired here to teach them to treat people with my skin color bad. But we're not allowed to talk about it, at least not until recently when we're finally seeing the truth. We're finally getting information from the Department of Labor saying that they're not allowed to help us. They can only help immigrants, legal or illegal. Small Business Association cannot help us. They can only help immigrants, legal and illegal. As we go down the list, we're finding out that California carved out a group of individuals. And I agree, it's happened for years and decades. That's not the way I treat people, and that's not the way that we expect others to be treated. But as these policies progress, somehow they forgot that discrimination against any group of people is still discrimination. So here's where the tension emerges. Some proposals discuss direct payments or large financial compensation figures. So residents ask, can a city with budget deficits afford this? Would such payments withstand legal scrutiny? Would funding come from already strained taxpayers? These are legitimate fiscal questions. And if a city cannot balance its operating budget, proposing massive new financial commitments feels disconnected. It doesn't seem to add up mathematically. Moral debates are one thing, and math is another. If you cannot fund existing services sustainably, expanding obligations risk destabilization. And as we're talking about destabilization, one of the main factors that San Francisco wants and needs to stabilize is that of rent. They need people in the city, and yet they're constantly fighting the landlords who are providing that. The city over and over wants to seize the property so they can manage it themselves, or turn it back over to lobbyists that are part of private equity companies so they can manage large building projects rather than have to handle each and every landlord. So one of the supervisors has decided that although he's put it on the ballot multiple times and it's gotten voted down, he snuck into the fire regulations a requirement that all rental units in San Francisco must have fire sprinklers. Well, as you know, many of these buildings were built around the 1920s. Beautiful old Victorians. You can't just retrofit and run sprinklers through these buildings. But there was no cost associated with it. So various apartment and rental associations did an estimate. And first and foremost, they found out that, yep, the number one lobby to push this through was the plumbers union. But they also realized that it was going to cost about $300,000 per unit, not per building. So let's say that you have a 12 unit building. That would be 12 times 300,000. People in San Francisco have been holding on to the rental property for years. In fact, anybody who can get away with not renting it at all has realized that it's better to leave it vacant than to rent it for a pittance, because you cannot increase the rent to cover property taxes or utility increases or fees like this. You get capped, and you can never evict anybody responsibly. You have to buy them out, get them to move. It's a major process. The right of home ownership is not the same in California, more or less in San Francisco. So San Francisco has debated strict retrofitting requirements for indoor fire sprinklers in certain residential units because they say safety matters. Yet the fire department just came out saying that the recent building that burned in the fire in the Market District would not have been affected because of the provisions of this policy didn't even include that building. So if the fire department isn't saying safety matters, when compliance costs approach 6 figures per unit in older buildings, landlords pass cost to tenants. In this case, they can't. They're locked down. They're forced to exit the market. But they can't do that either. There are many units right now that are trying to be sold, but nobody will buy them because they can never make up that $300,000 bill per unit. They're basically worthless. All because one individual is quite honestly a jack with a ASS on the end. He tried multiple times to step up into the big role of mayor, didn't get it, and this is his final legacy, to destroy the generational wealth of tens of thousands of families. Because fines will ensue, and eventually the cities will force foreclosure. They can't even exit the market. When lobbying influences regulation, whether by contractors, trade groups, or industry, policy can unintentionally inflate housing costs. Every additional mandate compounds affordability, and California's housing affordability crisis is already severe. So the question that ChatGPT asks is, are we layering mandates without calculating the cumulative burden? I don't think anybody seems to care about other people's money. Well, at least any politician. I want to talk here about private equity ruining your HOA. Private equity firms are increasingly purchasing large portfolios of residential housing and even manage homeowners association. There's huge benefits for them to do this. And this really matters because private equity has one mandate: return maximization. It's not about you, it's about giving money back to their investors. When HOAs become revenue vehicles rather than community stewards, fees increase, fines escalate, maintenance contracts consolidate, and the maintenance contracts are only given to other organizations underneath the equity umbrella, which means it costs more. Decisions are centralized. Residents lose local control. Private equity is not inherently evil, but incentives matter. When your neighborhood becomes an asset class, community governance shifts toward profit extraction, and that changes the social contract of home ownership. Private equity has now come for homeowners associations throughout California. They offer a small loan and offer some free education to the current management company over the organizations. And pretty soon, the individual that is usually a family owned business running the organization decides to take some of that money and maybe improve offices a little bit or vehicles. And all of a sudden, they realize they've stepped outside the bounds of what they can pay. They've bitten off more than they can chew. And soon, they are now beholden to the equity company. That was their goal. All of a sudden, those nice shiny cars and the new offices, it had to be paid back. And this doesn't happen over decades. It happens over a number of years. The big shift was actually in 2021 in California. While everybody was locked down, private equity companies started to search further and started to wine and dine plumbers and electricians. You start to see that as you call around for a price, they're all the same. But everybody says they're family owned. And you would think that they would care that they either get the job or they don't. Well, part of the NDA is they're not allowed to tell you that they're not family owned anymore. They are a name only. They sold out. And just because they were stupid doesn't mean that you need to leave your home. So now I've started in another fight of a lifetime to get another group of people to wake up and realize that no, just because the HOA manager was stupid and lost his company does not mean that we need to lose the homes. Wish me luck on that one. This brings me to TPUSA, Youth Politics and Child Protective Service calls. Youth political engagement is definitely increasing. Organizations like Turning Point USO, founded by Charlie Kirk, mobilize high school and college students. In at least one recent instance, a parent reportedly contacted Child Protective Services over concerns about political involvement at a school event. This was reported on Fox News. But this signals something much bigger. And I want to pause here for a minute. I've had a conversation with my son. Definitely we're conservatives. And there's a lot of spaces where I push programs forward and I hold programs back. It's an opportunity cost. There's only so many hours in a day. There's only so much we can learn and only so much we can have focus on. And when those dials are slid back and forth, when we're celebrating Chuck Schumer's rainbow flag as a constitutional right on every building, we're not understanding the message of the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States flag. Now, I am not one that takes my American flag and goes into other countries and tells them that my country is the best country and they need to bow to me and I'm going to fly my flag. When I leave my home, I'm respectful to my neighbor. And when I leave my country, I'm respected to their country. However, for some reason, as the United States has become an absolute dumping ground, we've become a shithole. As everybody comes here demanding that this is an immigration country and they have a right to be here and that their culture is more important than the prevailing culture that already existed here. There's something wrong with that picture. Not only is it disrespectful, it's pushing out the values of this land. Now, if we reverse this, where can you go? Where can I go? There isn't another country on this planet that would be as kind and forgiving and as open with our legal system as what we have granted here. In fact, it's been so kind that I've been pushed out. As I needed help from my son, we didn't get any. As I needed help to save my home, nope, didn't get any, because all the legal services went to immigrants. As I went to different NGOs to ask about next steps and doing it myself, no, all the grants went to immigrants. And as I continued to fight for my job, no matter what it looked like, no, those went to immigrants. The immigrants themselves, I would say, are just like you and I. But that's shifted over the last 4 or 5 years. The attitude is different. The attacks are different. And the twisting of the laws against us has pushed us to be outsiders in our own country. This is dangerous territory. This is what breaks countries. Who's paying for that? As my pockets are being emptied, what do your pockets look like? So as I continue as a conservative, I've been very much supportive of Turning Point USA and Turning Point Faith and Turning Point initiatives, and even having my son study Charlie Kirk's messages and his debate tactics. Get your feet on the ground, stand like a man, I would say. And yet, I absolutely do not want TPUSA anywhere near my child or any other child right now, because there seems to be a theme that continues to rise. It pops up over and over again. I don't know if it follows TPUSA around or if TPUSA is following it around. Either way, I don't like it. And it sure seems to be entwined in one way or another that hasn't been quite clearly outlined with the Einstein files. And again, this signals something much bigger. When we reached a point where political disagreement is being escalated into institutional intervention, this is dangerous. Calling Child Protective Services is like telling the government you want them to step in and help. Well, it is. But these are the liberals. These might not be the kind, caring individuals who follow the law. It might just be an excuse to separate children from their families. And I don't think that's what was intended here. But as we swerve from Chuck Schumer pushing one of the craziest ideas ever heard, other than we saw under the Biden administration, the roll down of the flags right on the White House with the red backlighting, I don't think anything's ever been the same. So we've reached a point where political disagreement is being escalated into institutional intervention. And again, I'll say this again, this is dangerous territory. You and I don't have the money to fight. We've been pushed aside, overtaxed, holding on to everything we have. How do we maintain sanity? How do we keep going? Because when the civic debate triggers child welfare complaints, polarization has crossed into institutional weaponization. We saw this under the Biden era weaponization of the FBI in Virginia, as the FBI was called in order to participate in removing children via the Child Protective Services from people who spoke out at the school board meetings. Their children were in the school. They didn't appreciate the attacks against their children, and they were voicing the opinion. And instead of resolving the ridiculous issue, the school board contacted the FBI, and the FBI got involved and destroyed lives. Healthy democracies require tolerance of ideological diversity. Silencing youth political engagement, left or right, undermines civic culture. And silencing their parents, it's a whole nother level. The wealth trap. How Wall Street could legally hurt retirement savings. We all know if you're less than 5 years close to retirement, you need to be out of the stock market. But we can't really live outside the stock market. It's a pyramid scheme. It's growing. As Pam Bondi pointed out last week, it's over 50,000. What do you care about anything else? Let's wake up. Your 401k, your IRA, your pension, they are invested in the markets. The markets are not fair. The markets are funneled by all the other 401ks that continue to put money into this funnel. It grows because more money is being put in and locked into the system. Locked in until you retire. Markets fluctuate. During crashes, asset values decline. It's very clear that we're about to bump up against Iran. During crashes, those values decline. Now, here's the structural risk many people don't seem to talk about. Retirement accounts are not insured against the market. That's why they're not pensions. They are protected against brokerage insolvency, but in very limited ways. It's not even like having $250,000 in an FDIC account. And as I learned, that's per branch, not per bank. I mean, you only get it per bank. But each branch has to be FDIC assured. So make sure that your particular money is insured. And again, that insolvency limit is limited, but not against asset price collapse. In systemic crises, stocks drop, bonds reprice, funds gate withdrawals, companies freeze redemptions. In extreme financial crisis, governments can change withdrawal rules. They can change taxes or liquidity access. We've seen massive bank buyouts and corporate buyouts. I've never had a buyout. This isn't conspiracy by any means, it's structure, which we opened this conversation with. These are systems. If markets fall 40%, your retirement falls 40%. The climb up is not another 40%. It's much more. Once that money is down, it just doesn't pop up the same. And yet it's legal. It's like the waves popping in and out of the shore. Your money flows in and out. There's not much you can do about it. It's legal. And when valuations are historically elevated, risk compounds. So the question becomes, are Californians financially resilient, or are we overexposed? After the way that we've been treated, I think anybody who's getting a pension from California should lose it. And you might be shocked by that comment. But if people aren't even willing to do their job now, why are they thinking that they're going to get retirement ongoing when they've misappropriated our funds for decades? Whole generation. Prop 13, the firewall. This could be the hole in the dam that breaks everything. So Proposition 13 is a major proposition that passed in California in 1978. And what it did is it limits property tax increases in California by capping annual assessment growth unless property changes ownership. Supporters argue it protects homeowners. So if you bought a home at X dollar amount, it can only raise so much a year. What it does is it prevents you from paying more money because a stupid idiot next door overpaid for their house, and so your home got reassessed. it slowly grows. Now, we, of course, have all kinds of voter earmarks attached to our property taxes, but at least the baseline tax is supposed to be quite stagnant. Although mine has more than tripled in the years that I have been in this home. Without Prop 13, I would have lost my home years ago. Completely. Instead of just the recent. So opponents argue that it restricts municipal revenue and shifts burden to other taxes. Well, if you have nobody here paying property taxes, what do you have? But as my argument yesterday outlined, math matters. Math is reality. How much do you need to squeeze a turnip? In the earlier years, when somebody buys a home, they have money that they're generating from the workplace. But as they grow, their wealth doesn't continue to grow necessarily. Should they lose their home because other people don't know how to run a budget or manage other people's money? As I stated from Beverly's case, because her home was allegedly stolen and the fraud was allowed to persist by the county, they benefited by almost $42,000 a year in increase because they reassessed it with the new ownership. But with Beverly, because she'd owned it for so long, she was capped. There was a maximum amount that they could bill her every year. So now the county can benefit from allowing this to happen in the county. So if overturned, property taxes could reset to market value annually. Again, I agreed to pay for my house at a specific amount that I knew that I could pay and manage throughout my life. I had my vision that I would buy my home when working and be able to retire here when older after I raised my family. That's not California's vision. They want us here during the working years and out after that. Property taxes, if they reset, they would apparently, it would be massive. It would be a massive blow. In fact, I'm thinking about the last street I lived on, and any of the Americans still left would absolutely lose their homes completely. They're retired at this point. They would not be able to pay the adjusted amount. It just isn't there. You can't go from $1,000 a year to $50,000 a year in only property taxes. That's not utility bills or insurance costs or car payments or gasoline or food. People just don't have that. California has already taken that from us. In high appreciation areas, that would mean dramatic increases. How many homes would we lose? How many people would become homeless? No one knows the exact numbers, but the recalculation of those that are just biting at the chomp to take that money is massive. But fixed income homeowners would be the most vulnerable. Without caps, property tax volatility increases and housing stability once again decreases. Now, wasn't the whole point of California in order to stabilize housing? This doesn't line up. It's a money grab. And just like the billionaires forced to leave the state and take their businesses with them, their corporations, and millions of jobs, Prop 13 would kick out the rest of us. So when petitions circulate to preserve Prop 13, they reflect fear of displacement, not ideology. Fear. So the Save Prop 13 Act just collected the necessary signatures to get on the next ballot. I absolutely beg anybody that is voting in the California election to vote yes to preserve Prop 13, however that ends up being worded on the ballot. Without Prop 13, pensions, teachers, doctors, nurses, Anybody tied to the economy of the tax dollar in the United States, in California, will lose everything. This will be something that California will never come back from. No matter how many immigrants they've imported to vote this through, there won't be enough. So in summary, can we live within our means? I've gone through a lot of topics here this evening, and you and I have proven that we can live within our means. We don't need the government to wipe out our credit cards, wipe out our student loan debts. We can make wise choices. No, unlike CFCU Credit Union, we don't have to go buy that fancy coffee every day and shovel out that money day after day after day to a corporation. That's ridiculous. You and I can make wise choices so that we can still live a joyful and productive life and enjoy what's actually important in this world, time with our families. So when I say, can we live within our means? I'm not really asking you or me. I'm asking our politicians, those who are deciding what they're doing with the money when they empty out our pockets and still don't have enough. Here's the thread connecting everything this evening. Revenue extraction, mandate expansion, talking again about Mamdani in New York City demanding an increase of property taxes to pay for the sanctuary city that he is doubling down on. Political escalation, talking about even Chuck Schumer and his flag policy. Market exposure, and housing fragility. Where are we going to live? California is extremely wealthy, but wealth does not equal sustainability. The question is actually very, very simple. Can we, as government structured or governed structures, live within our means? Can we prioritize core services, limit regulatory infection, protect homeowners, don't allow our homes to be stolen, and when it is, take care of the people to make sure that they're protected? Reduce political weaponization and attacks. Increase fiscal transparency. Where is the money coming from and where is it going? All these pet projects or NGOs that are peeling off 90% of the tax dollar in order to say that they gave less than 10%? Why do we even allow that? You know, without discipline, even the richest state can destabilize. California does not need collapse. It needs calibration. And calibration begins with honesty. It's a value conversation. And I believe if you made it this far, you care. It matters to you. Here's my question to you. What is the one reform that would stabilize California the fastest? What do you think we can all do together to stabilize this and save California from falling off that cliff? Can it be done? Comment below. You know, I ask you, be kind and share this episode, especially the link about Beverly. Beverly sincerely needs help. If you know anybody that's a civil rights or a real estate attorney, then please ask them to watch the video and reach out. And if you're not, then please just share it to somebody who is. We don't need to keep going through the emails of reasons or legal bar associations. We are with our feet every day trying to find a solution here. We need actual attorneys that will step up and help us. And we're not doing a GoFundMe. Beverly's very proud. She's not asking for money. All she wants is her own home back. That which was allegedly stolen from her. She wants to be able to put her head on her own pillow before she dies. Remember, policy is not abstract, and it lands at your doorstep. Once again, this is Tech Reality here in Silicon Valley. My name is Barbara, and we're just getting started. Have a great evening tonight.